This is kind of what soft power does, right? It might even improve my dating chance. One story I've done is about, Western women coming to Korea after watching a lot of K-drama, and because they want to primarily date Korean men.
Japan has Hello Kitty and Pokemon. China has its microdramas, but it's South Korea with the K-pop phenomenon, Oscar-winning films, and viral Netflix hits that's currently reshaping the idea of what's cool in Asia. Soft power isn't just about pop culture though. Governments here know whether it's entertainment or economics, a country's ability to charm others can achieve real diplomatic goals. But how much further can South Korea go? Are other countries here in Asia catching up? Has the Korean wave peaked? I'm Mariko in Singapore, and this is Asia Pacific from the BBC World Service. Twice a week, we bring you Asia Pacific stories, unpacked by those who know them best. I have Fan One in the studio and Jake Kwon in Seoul. Thank you both. Firstly, Fan, I understand that you discovered Korean culture in the 2000s, probably way ahead of everyone else, when it used to be, I guess, kind of more niche. When did you feel that Asian soft power, especially South Korean ones, have become kind of mainstream cool, especially in the West?
Yeah, I was a bit ahead of my time, I have to say. I randomly discovered this world of South Korean entertainment on the internet in late 2000. And that time, I think it was nowhere like even mainstream in Asia. But I think then there's this wave of K-pop idols. They're the second generation, Dongbang Shinki, Super Junior, and then like girls' generation, Big Bang. They became really huge in Asia, and then you can kind of get this sense that K-pop is really powerful. But then still, even then, you didn't really see them getting much attention in the West, in the English-speaking world. And I think BTS really was the game changer there. And in the late 2010s, BTS, then followed by Blackpink, you had this momentum of K-pop going in the global stage, and I think that is when I think K-pop got discovered by the whole world and everyone trying to figure out what made them so good.
And they can't seem to get enough of it at the moment.
No.
Jake, did you notice that shift in attitude towards K-pop or K-culture?
I think, South Korea's Korea wave has been around for 20, 30 years. And as far as I can remember, I as a child, started seeing these headlines about how popular some of these shows are in China and Japan. The bands were really big. Big Bang was really hot at the time. And then I remember, I went over to Canada where I grew up, and my friends in their kind of secondary school, the middle school there, they asked me, do you know Soneoshide? Do you know Girls' Generation? And then they also, started showing me videos, music videos. So I think there was a lot of Asian Americans as well as the, Asians who were really embracing it at the time. But, when I ask some of the people who are really big fans of it, who are, non-Asians, Americans or Europeans, who are really into it now, who are now almost chosen life in Korea because they were so into it, they tell me that they were really into kind of Japanese culture first, whether that's anime or like J-pop, and then they were introduced to it through YouTube and other streaming services like Netflix. So I think there's a pipeline, and that kind of shift came about, I don't know, when Netflix and YouTube really became everywhere.
I guess if the goal of soft power is to improve the image of your country through your cultural exports, I guess South Korea has really succeeded. But I remember back in the 80s, the 90s, Japan was quite a leader with, Hello Kitty and Pokemon and all the games as well. And then South Koreans just kind of, overtaken us in the pop culture sphere. How did they do that, Jake?
It's something that is still kind of being debated, but it is. I think it's a good mix of kind of government getting out of the way. South Korea, if you remember, was a military dictatorship. There was a censorship on what you can and not say about it. You couldn't really criticize the government. And then around the democratization of 1980s, the government, really allowed everybody to kind of start voicing their opinions. They really got out of the way, and they let all kinds of media companies to start sprouting. from the earlier kind of state control model. And then South Korea also was becoming a really rich country at the time. And a lot of South Koreans, they grew up watching Hollywood films, listening to, American musicians. So they really wanted to emulate that. And they had the money at the time. So you got this really high production value stuff that is able to kind of touch on any taboo subject that might be in any other Asian countries. And then you start to see that these become really, really popular in Asia. And then you see like Netflix and YouTube really creating this super highway to sell these Korean contents to anywhere in the globe.
Yeah, I actually, it's quite interesting, Jake, you mentioned this, like the government got out of the way. But I do wonder, like all these countries, they all want to develop their soft power, right? But why is South Korea's like entertainment industry so successful? Like, why?
No, I think that's a very good question. And many countries, they have tried as well. But if you look at South Korean government spending in the cultural, department, cultural ministry, it's still only around 1 to 1.5% of the national budget, which is not that much higher than, other developed country. Yeah, South Korea has been putting a lot of money behind it, but the money started coming after the success. But it was really not successful until the advent of the social media. And I feel like K-pop especially is something that is still not there in the mainstream America. It is still kind of has that feel that this is something that is niche, or maybe if you do not identify yourself as somebody of mainstream culture, this is something that you can kind of enjoy and build a community with other people who also feel like you're a bit of an outsider. So you really needed that social media to kind of infiltrate and penetrate the kind of the type of people who would enjoy this kind of content.
And I guess now many other Asian countries want to repeat the success of South Korea. China, for one, has been trying to boost its soft power, whether that be the language being, spoken outside of the Chinese community, or through pop culture as well. My youngest is absolutely still obsessed with Labubu, for example. How much of that, though, Fan, is it state controlled, or is it kind of organic, spontaneous cultural export?
I think if we look, okay, China is definitely a different case from South Korea, right? Because the state control is so much more like obvious in China. Or, if we say the South Korean soft power development is quite organic, I would say China, it usually would be something like state initiated first, like the Chinese language learning boom. China tried to push for it by establishing all these Confucius institutes around the world, but then it's easy to backfire when China became the target of espionage suspicions and a lot of accusations like of human rights records. So then like these kind of state-backed institutions would become target as well, and as we are now seeing with the Confucius institutions around the world. But Labubu is an interesting case because I think Labubu is a good example of where the Chinese soft power is right now. Labubu is a doll, right? I'm sure everyone knows what Labubu is now, although you might, disagree whether it's cute or not. But a Labubu was not created for soft power purpose. It is a business brand. It was made to create profit for the company, Pop Mart. But then, as it became so popular and viral around the world, the Chinese government is claiming it as a soft power win. But if you look at a Labubu, it doesn't really look particularly Chinese. And people who buy it probably don't mind or don't care whether it's Chinese or not. But then still, the success of Labubu would boost China's soft power image because it makes people think China would be cool enough to produce something like this, right? So this is, I think, where China's soft power is now. It's like embedded into consumer trends, into pop culture, like internet culture. So it's approaching people in a way that is less political.
I always wondered, like, because China has some of these element going with it, right? It's a rich country. It definitely has money and it has talent, right? And it has a huge market. and it's very famous. Like no one in the world doesn't know what China is. Everybody knows what China is, but with its kind of censorship that is in place, and also kind of the global public, they are sometimes suspicious of Chinese government, or they are threatened by Chinese government. I mean, will that kind of, can we see, C-pop, supplanting K-pop one day? Can we see Chinese TV shows and movies on Netflix, becoming the most watched content? I mean, do you see a future like that?
Well, I think, okay, that's a very good question, Jake. Well, I think in this current climate, it's hard to see that happen anytime soon. I think because the relationship between China and the West is still changing, and I think that is the key here in terms of whether we will see China whether we will see people in the West have a more favorable opinion about China in the near future.
Right. I just want to also say, I was talking about the negative view of China might impede its soft power, but also soft power actually improves your image, right? Sometimes it's almost also like a virtuous cycle, right? You have more soft power, and thus there's a better image of your country, and that makes you have even more soft power, and then there's this cycle that kind of builds on snowballs, and this is something that we saw, and it's definitely really kind of, I guess I want to touch on and ask you, kind of, Mariko, did you also feel, because I feel like Japanese soft power was really exuberant in the 80s and 90s. I mean, did you feel that? Did you notice any personal benefits?
Not really, but I guess that was kind of the norm growing up, like Hello Kitty and Pokemon being popular. But as a kid, I didn't really think of whether they were popular overseas. I think it was almost when K-pop started to do really well, and I thought, oh, but we had J-pop bands as well. Why couldn't they become so much as popular as K-pop bands? And then I think, but even then, I was still adamant that no, Japan still has strong soft power. If this is a competition, we could still be winning with Studio Ghibli and Nintendo games and stuff. Until my two daughters got absolutely obsessed with K-pop Demon Hunters, and that's when I thought, okay, they nailed it. They know exactly what to do to capture the mind of American, Western, other countries' fans. I mean, I guess in a way, the three countries all influence each other in
Definitely.
their soft culture.
Yeah.
I don't want to turn this conversation into something too controversial, starting to talk about what's Korean and what's Chinese and what's Japanese. But I think it's fair to say that we're kind of all affected among each other, aren't we? And at the same time, there's that American influence that you talked about, Jake, and that brings me to probably a rather controversial question of is K-pop Demon Hunters even Korean? Because I was surprised to learn when I was watching the documentary of how the program was made that a lot of the singers are Korean American. So what would you say? Is it Korean or is it American?
Well, I think inside South Korea, there is no real controversy of Korean people, feeling like something was stolen from them because Sony Pictures made this, really successful TV, animation that uses Korean element. I mean, they do a really, really good job of depicting Korean culture very faithfully. I think a lot of Korean people were actually very happy to see K-pop Demon Hunters, even though Korean, enterprises not making a single dollar out of this, right? But if you look at the kind of what's happening beyond that, South Korea's tourist numbers are going to go up because of this, this really, really successful animation, and this is kind of what soft power does, right? It kind of goes beyond the hard dollars of how many tickets it sold. If I were a Korean salesman, my emails might get opened more often. It might even improve my dating chance. One story I've done is about, Western women coming to Korea after watching a lot of K-drama, and because they want to primarily date Korean men. So, these kind of stuff do impact our daily personal lives.
Firstly, are you benefiting from this? And secondly,
I can't possibly comment.
But he's smiling. Hey, he's laughing.
Yeah, exactly. But I do wonder whether South Korea has achieved so much in recent years, winning all sorts of awards. I can't even remember all of them now. But, are there concerns that maybe South Korea has peaked? I want both of your opinions. Fan?
I would say the answer is no, because I feel like there's still a lot of South Korean like culture that we don't know or we haven't seen on the global stage yet. I think last week I just went to this play in Singapore, starring some of the best South Korean actors, and like that is something we haven't really seen yet. I think the theaters and then like this year the South Korean author Han Gang won the Nobel Literature Prize, but we haven't really seen a lot of Korean books being translated into English yet. So I think South Korea definitely still has a lot to offer.
Yeah, I would like to say that, we've been here before. We had this conversation before many, many times throughout the rise of the Korean wave, and every 5 years we ask, okay, can we succeed even more? Can we get even bigger? And each time the answer was yes. I felt like, when Korea's K-pop bands were really big in Japan, that felt like a peak in the 90s. And then, South Korea's movie does really big. And then when Parasite won Oscar, it really felt like I was hit in the head with a hammer. It felt like this is the peak. How can we go any further? And then Han Gang wins Nobel Prize. I feel like a culture is not just movies and TV shows and music, right? There's like numerous genres where Korea stuff can succeed. And I remember asking years ago to people, hey, do you think there's any connection between K-pop success and K-drama success and K-film success? And they'll be like, what are you talking about? They're completely different genres. They're not connected at all. But because in the last few years, these successes in such disparate genres are happening so quickly right off the back of each other, some people started going like, well, maybe there's something here,
And as other Asian countries try to do the same, would you say that there are limits when it comes to Asian soft power because of the language barrier and so on? Do you foresee any kind of challenges?
Right now, I don't see any. I think South Korea culture is so strong, so powerful. It's hard to imagine that there would be another contender to match the level of South Korea's success. I think right away. But having said that, I think maybe there will be different areas where other countries can surpass or like have their own success. I think, like we said, in China's innovation and China's tech and how Chinese products are like winning the consumers around the world, I think that is definitely something that I think China can do because of its economic size, right, and capability. So I think that is where China has a very good advantage.
But Korea also does, I think one thing Korean does really well is to take something that is very successful and kind of repackage it, give it a little twist, and then sell it, And I don't think that formula is going to be something truly, truly exceptional. Of course, there's the artistry, there is something, a very Korean thing about it. But ultimately, I think other countries can come in and learn a few lessons and find their own twist to kind of recreate that success.
We'll leave it there. Thank you, Jake and Fan, and thank you for watching. Click like and subscribe so you won't miss an episode, and send us your questions in the comment section as well, and I'll make sure that Fan and Jake answer some of your questions as well. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.